There's a kind of lostness that doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't come with breakdowns or rock bottoms or chaos. It's quiet, it's slow. It creeps in between routines. It lives in the moments where you do everything you're supposed to and still feel absolutely nothing. You show up to work, you reply to messages, you make plans, you laugh when expected, and yet something inside feels disconnected. Like you're watching your life happen from behind glass. You're not in crisis, but you're not present either. You're not drowning, but you're not breathing deeply. It's the in-between, the numb middle, the place where your soul starts whispering, "This isn't it," but your mind hasn't caught up. Carl Jung understood this terrain better than anyone. He didn't write for people who were falling apart. He wrote for people who were functioning on the outside, but drifting away from their center on the inside. He believed that lostness wasn't a mistake. It was a signal, a calling, a necessary breakdown of identity before rebirth. According to Jung, every person lives with two versions of self: the persona, who you think you're supposed to be, and the self who you truly are underneath it all. The more distance there is between those two, the more lost you'll feel, not because you're broken, but because you're out of alignment. Think about that. The job you chose, was it truly yours? Or did it feel like the right path? The relationship you're in, does it feed your spirit? Or does it check the box of not being alone? The life you've built, is it made of your desires or your survival patterns? Jung believed that when the gap between who you are and who you perform to be gets too wide, the psyche sends out distress signals. But those signals don't always sound like breakdowns. Sometimes they sound like boredom, exhaustion, restlessness, apathy, feeling like nothing's really wrong but nothing's right either. This is what Jung called the beginning of individuation, the soul's way of saying, it's time to come home. Lostness is not failure, it's feedback. It's your deeper self knocking on the door saying, I can't breathe in this version of your life. But because we're conditioned to avoid discomfort, we ignore the signal. We overbook our calendar, we scroll, we numb. We tell ourselves, I should be grateful, and shame the part of us that's asking for more. We keep playing the role, keep wearing the mask, and wonder why life feels heavy in all the places it used to feel full. The truth is, you can't think your way out of lostness. You can't productivity hack your way back to alignment. This isn't a mindset issue, it's a soul mismatch. And the longer you pretend you're fine, the louder the symptoms become. The solution, Jung taught, isn't to work harder. It's to go inward, to stop asking, what should I be doing, and start asking, who am I beneath what I've been doing? The feeling of being lost is often the first step in becoming found, but only if you're willing to listen. Lostness is sacred. It's your soul trying to return to itself, but most people run from it. They try to fill the space instead of honoring it. They jump into new jobs, new relationships, new identities, hoping the emptiness will go away. But the truth is, the only way out of lostness is through it. You have to walk into the fog without needing to see the end. You have to strip away the roles and ask yourself, if I stop trying to be what everyone expects, what would I become? Jung believed this stage was unavoidable, that every person who wants to become whole must pass through this valley, the valley of doubt, of emptiness, of questioning everything you once held as truth. It's painful, but it's also profound, because when the false layers fall away, what's left is real. And that's what you've been aching for, isn't it? Not just a better life, a truer one. So if you feel lost right now, pause, breathe. Don't rush to fix it. Don't distract yourself from it, sit with it. Ask it what it wants to show you, not with judgment, but with reverence, because this lostness, it's not a flaw, it's a doorway. And on the other side is the version of you that doesn't just survive, they recognize themselves again. If this content is making sense to you, then click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Why your soul is bored, and what Jung says to do about it. There's a difference between being tired and being soul tired. You can sleep 8 hours, cancel your plans, take a week off, and still feel drained. That's not physical exhaustion, that's spiritual boredom. It's what happens when you've spent too long playing small. When you've outgrown your environment, your patterns, your roles, but haven't yet given yourself permission to change them. And you try to ignore it because things make sense. Because on paper, you have no reason to complain. You have a job, a home, people who care about you. You're functioning. But beneath the surface, something's withering. And the worst part, you can't always explain it. because you're not in danger. You're in stagnation. Carl Jung called this the dull ache of unlived potential. Not depression, not crisis, just a slow erosion of the self. That happens when we live according to scripts that don't belong to us, when we numb our instincts in favor of logic, when we replace desire with duty, when we mistake repetition for stability. Your soul wasn't designed for performance. It was designed for participation, to feel, to expand, to become. But modern life teaches you to shrink to stay in line, to play it safe, to keep things clean. And so you start dying in all the quiet ways. You stop speaking up. You stop risking. You stop listening to the small voice inside that says, "There's more than this." And over time, that voice doesn't disappear. It just gets quieter, until one day you can't feel much at all. That numbness, that's not failure. That's your soul putting itself in storage, waiting for you to come back. Jung believed boredom wasn't a surface problem, it was a symptom, a flag, a soul-level alert system saying, "You're overdue for truth." But instead of listening, we do what we've been trained to do. We consume. We escape. We try to fill the boredom with stimulation, endless scrolling, shopping, drama, noise. But stimulation isn't the same as meaning. And the more you confuse the two, the more lost you feel. Meaning doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention. It waits. It whispers. It lives in the parts of you you've forgotten, the child who used to dance for no reason, the teenager who used to write poetry at 2 a.m., the young version of you who had wild, irrational dreams. That part of you isn't gone, it's bored. Not because you're lazy, but because you've been too busy being practical, too busy surviving, too busy checking off boxes that lead to nowhere sacred. Jung would say it's time to bring that part of you back online. The one who creates without knowing if it's good. The one who speaks without knowing if they'll be accepted. The one who lives from instinct, not instruction. That's not reckless. That's integration. That's the healing of a fragmented self. It doesn't mean you quit your life and run away. It means you stop abandoning the parts of you that make life worth living in the first place. So what does this actually look like? It looks like space. Unstructured, undistracted space. Not to be productive, but to be present. It looks like saying no to something that drains you, even if it disappoints others. It looks like trying something new, not because it will succeed, but because your soul is curious. It looks like asking, "What do I want?" and not immediately filtering the answer through other people's expectations. You don't have to fix your life all at once. You just have to give your soul permission to exist again. Because the longer you force it into silence, the louder the lostness becomes. And eventually it won't just be numbness. It'll be depression, resentment, illness, not because you're weak, but because you're spiritually malnourished. Carl Jung didn't just analyze the mind. He honored the psyche, the sacred self, and he believed that healing wasn't about control, it was about returning to inner alignment. You don't need a new plan. You need a new relationship with yourself, one that doesn't treat aliveness like a luxury, one that welcomes desire without shame, one that stops trying to be good and starts trying to be whole. Your soul is not gone. It's just tired of waiting for permission. Give it permission, before the world convinces you to live another year asleep. The persona trap. How the you they love isn't really you. Most people don't love you. They love your persona, the polished version of you that smiles on cue, avoids discomfort, stays agreeable, and knows how to keep the peace. Jung called it your social mask, the role you play to survive in a world that rewards compliance over truth. You learnt it early, that you had to be useful to be loved, that being too loud, too sensitive, too opinionated made people uncomfortable, that you had to choose between being accepted and being authentic. So you chose acceptance because what else could you do? As a child, safety matters more than self-expression, but now you're grown, and the mask no longer fits. In fact, it's suffocating. This is why you feel lost, because the version of you that people praise isn't the version of you that feels most alive, and it creates a fracture. They admire you for your calm, but you're screaming inside. They thank you for being easygoing, but you haven't felt at ease in years. They say you're so reliable, so generous, so strong, but they've never met your truth. And deep down, a part of you knows they love the role, not the real. And that knowledge, it breaks something. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, aching way. You start to wonder, if I stopped performing, would anyone stay? Jung warned us the longer you wear the mask, the harder it is to take off, Because you start confusing it with your identity. You start to believe that your worth is tied to your utility, that your likability is proof of your goodness, that disappearing your needs is the price of connection, and you keep playing the part, even as your inner self grows more restless, even as you feel lonelier surrounded by people than when you're completely alone. Because how could you not? They're loving someone, but it isn't really you. This is the persona trap, and almost everyone falls into it at some point. You don't do it on purpose. You do it because it works until it doesn't, until your nervous system starts glitching, until you dread every interaction, until you feel resentful without knowing why, until you start to hate the person they think you are, because it's not the one you recognize in your own reflection. That's when the mask becomes a prison. But here's the truth: the moment you realize this, you're already halfway free, because you can't heal what you don't see. And once you see the mask, you can start peeling it back layer by layer, slowly, carefully, with compassion, not all at once, but honestly. It starts with small truth-tellings, saying no when you mean no, expressing a real opinion even if it risks rejection, letting someone down gently and watching the world not end, letting silence fall where you once rushed to fill it with approval. You start remembering the you beneath the role. And the beautiful part, the more you do this, the more your nervous system softens, because you're no longer abandoning yourself to stay safe. You're no longer betraying your truth to stay liked. You're becoming whole. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That privilege is expensive. It costs your reputation, your people-pleasing, your fantasy of being universally adored. But what it gives back is freedom. You don't need everyone to like you. You need to like who you are when you're alone. You need to sleep at night knowing you didn't sell yourself for acceptance. You need to build relationships rooted in resonance, not performance. Because love built on your persona, it will always feel empty. But love built on yourself, that's nourishment, that's safety, that's real. And yes, some people will fall away when the mask comes off. Let them. They weren't in love with you. They were in love with the character you played. You don't need that kind of love anymore. You're not here to perform. You're here to be. Even if it's messy, even if it's inconvenient, even if it's less digestible. Because the only thing worse than feeling lost is building a life that's based on being someone you're not. Jung didn't promise that removing the persona would be easy, but he knew it was essential. Because the longer you pretend, the harder it is to remember who you were before the pretending began. And who you were. That version is still waiting, still alive, still yours. Let them meet that you, even if fewer people stay, because the ones who do will feel like home. Why you're not broken, you're in psychological rebirth. Feeling lost doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It usually means something's waking up. The discomfort, the confusion, the numbness, these aren't signs of failure. They're signs that your old identity is falling apart, and your new one hasn't fully formed yet. Carl Jung called this the psychological death, and rebirth process the ego death. It's what happens when the persona you've built, the habits you've mastered, the life you've structured starts to crack. Not because it was bad, but because it's too small for who you're becoming. Most people think breakdowns happen only when things go horribly wrong, but some of the deepest breakdowns come when everything seems fine, yet inside, it's like something sacred is dying. The truth is, it is. What's dying is the version of you that learned to survive by editing yourself. The one who made everyone else happy, but forgot how to recognize their own joy. The one who got really good at fitting in, but never actually felt like they belonged. And when that version starts to fall apart, it feels like chaos. You start questioning everything. Your career, your relationships, your choices, your purpose. But what's really happening isn't destruction. It's dismantling. Jung taught that the psyche has its own intelligence, that when your life becomes too disconnected from your soul, the psyche will initiate collapse to get your attention. This isn't depression. This is initiation. But here's the problem: no one talks about this. We live in a world that wants transformation without discomfort, that wants healing without rupture, that wants clarity without confusion. But that's not how it works. Before truth arrives, illusion must die. Before you can become who you are, who you really are, you have to let go of who you thought you were supposed to be. This part of the journey is hard because it's invisible. People won't see what you're going through. You won't get applause for it. You'll feel like a stranger in your own skin. And you won't have a clear map because you're drawing it as you walk. That's why Jung believed this phase, this lostness, is the most sacred part of psychological development. It means your ego is loosening its grip. Your instincts are taking the wheel. Your soul is beginning to lead. But that shift isn't clean, it's messy. It's confusing, it's painful. You'll want to go back to your old life. Even if it was misaligned just because it felt familiar, you'll try to cling to what you've outgrown. You'll want to numb the ache of becoming. Don't stay. Stay here. Stay in the unknown. This is the womb space, the creative void, the space between death and resurrection. You're not lost. You're between identities. And if you can breathe through this, something new will emerge. Not a better you, a truer one. Let yourself fall apart. Let the roles dissolve, let the grief come. Because you're not just grieving people, or places or timelines, you're grieving an old self. And that grief is sacred. That grief is medicine. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's what this rebirth is about. Making the unconscious conscious. Seeing your patterns, owning your shadows, reclaiming the parts of you that got buried under the performance of being okay. This is shadow work, and it doesn't happen on yoga mats or under full moons alone. It happens in the dark, in the silence, in the days where you don't recognize yourself, but you keep going anyway. You're not broken. You're being remade, not from scratch, but from truth. And yes, it's terrifying, but it's also holy. Because when you come out the other side of this, you won't just have clarity. You'll have depth. You'll have a self that you didn't borrow from. The world, a self you built from the inside out. This is what it means to truly heal. Not to become who you were, but to remember who you are underneath the layers. And the only way to get there is through this fog, this lostness, this pause between who you've been and who you're becoming. Don't rush it. Don't shame it. Honor it. Because this is what transformation actually looks like. It doesn't look like winning. It looks like breaking. It looks like weeping. It looks like silence. It looks like disappearing from who you were so you can finally arrive as who you are. The final return to self, and why feeling lost means you're closer than ever. You've spent so much time trying to find your way, through logic, through goals, through who others needed you to be. But the journey back to yourself was never going to be straight. It was always going to feel like getting lost, because what you're returning to isn't something new. It's something ancient, something original. It's the self that's been quietly waiting beneath the noise, the masks, the expectations. The self that isn't asking you to improve, it's asking you to remember. Carl Jung believed that the soul's greatest desire is not to become more impressive, it's to become more whole. And wholeness isn't about perfection, it's about reclamation. It's the process of gathering the parts of you left behind. The ones you abandoned to be loved, the ones you silenced to fit in, the ones you were told were too much, the ones you forgot were yours. And as you reclaim them, the fog starts to lift. Not all at once, but moment by moment. You start to hear your own voice again. You stop asking for directions from people who've never been where you're going. You stop needing to prove, to explain, to defend, because now you recognize yourself. That recognition is everything. It's the moment you look in the mirror and say, there you are. Not the version the world clapped for, the version you missed. And in that moment, the lostness breaks. Not because life suddenly makes sense, but because you do. You realize you were never off track. You were never broken. You were never late. You were just deep in the work of unbecoming, of shedding, of returning. And what a courageous thing that is, to stop pretending. To walk through the fire of not knowing, to sit in the silence until your soul speaks again. This is what it means to find yourself. Not to invent a new identity, but to come home to the one that was always there under the noise. The self that doesn't need a plan to feel safe. The self that doesn't need applause to feel worthy. The self that isn't afraid to be seen or to be still. The self that knows it's okay to not have it all figured out. It's okay to be in process. It's okay to just be. Because now you understand lostness isn't the opposite of clarity. It's what comes before it. Carl Jung's legacy wasn't just about theory. It was about depth, soul, shadow. He gave us permission to fall apart, to question, to feel, to wander, and still be wise. And if this video found you in the fog, let it remind you, fog doesn't mean failure. Fog means you're on sacred ground, you're close, don't rush. Stay gentle. Your next self is forming, and it needs you to trust the becoming, so breathe. Let go of the map. You are not lost, you are arriving. But even when we return to our true self, we often carry one last habit. That quietly keeps us stuck, our availability. We keep answering texts that drain us. We keep saying yes when we mean no. We keep showing up for people who never show up for us. In the next video, we explore what Carl Jung really meant about boundaries, identity, and energy, and why everything changes when you finally stop being available. Carl Jung. It's not about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. And you might be surprised what happens when you do. We'll see you there. Depthoria continues.